The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
All right, good day, tokers and tokets, and welcome. It is Wednesday, March 27th, 2013, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here, right at Rolla J Studios in beautiful Potland, Oregon. We got plenty of stuff to get to for today's show, not the least of which, of course, is seeing our good friend Brian the Red hanging out here in Studio Right. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, doing all right. Because it's Wednesday.
Gonna have to turn that up a little bit.
And move a little closer, too.
There we go. Hey, Brian's got the Pink Leaf t-shirt on today, and we've got some Pink Leaf news for you coming up a little bit later. And on tonight, we've got the Red Eyes Reggae Flashback, but it's a special edition, so tell them about how we're changing things up a bit.
So tonight, since we didn't get the video from last week, something happened with the stream capture, we're going to go ahead and redo last week's music with one exception. I changed one track up. But it's by the same band, so it doesn't really matter.
All right, sounds good.
And then that's going to be at 7 o'clock, and then we're going to go ahead and move it into the 8 o'clock hour with our regular show.
Right on. So check that out. 7 o'clock, special early time, a double shot of Red Eyes Reggae Flashback, plenty of roots reggae. You want to check that out. On today's show, Dr. Mitch Earlywine is back, joining us here in our Cannabis Q&A. You'll be able to ask him live questions by dialing into 971-533-7111 or get into our chat room right here on Ustream, and you can ask your questions of one of the leading researchers on marijuana, culture, science, history, and health in America. Also on today's show, at the end of the show, I'll have time for a radical rant. We're going to take a look back at the Box Canyon theory. If you've been following me for any length of time, you know about me and the Box Canyon. News out of Illinois and their medical marijuana bill has caused me to look again at the Box Canyon theory, and got a few things to say, so check it out in the rant today. Also on today's show, we are going to go behind the headlines, and in our behind the headlines segment today, we are going to be taking a look at, let me find that list there. Oh yes, The Atlantic, the magazine The Atlantic is taking a look at the legalization movement from a political perspective, eyeing toward 2016, but in doing so, takes a few swipes at Oregon that I want to talk about. But before all of that, we've got our 420 headline news. We've got a billboard appearing tomorrow in Oregon, a poll out of Missouri, an activist out of Colorado who has passed, University of Texas fighting the drug war, and the business of pot on Good Morning America.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information.
It's time for your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, March 27th, 2013. I'm Russ Belville. Legalization advocates spring for marijuana is safer billboard in Portland from OregonLive.com. Advocates of legalizing marijuana aren't giving up on the public relations fight. Thursday at 10:30 a.m., they will hold a press conference in downtown Portland to remind beer and wine lovers of the relative harmlessness of pot over alcohol to consumers. The billboard features a glass of beer, a glass of wine, and a marijuana leaf below the words beer, wine, and safer. House Bill 3371, which would legalize and tax pot, is up for a public hearing in the State House April 2nd. The media availability is at Southwest 13th Avenue and Southwest Alder, where the billboard is posted. We will be covering that live on 420 Radio tomorrow morning. Majority of Missourians support legalizing marijuana. This from theweedblog.com. On Monday, Show Me Cannabis Regulation released polling data showing that a majority of Missourians support legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana like alcohol. The poll, conducted by DHM Research, surveyed 500 likely 2014 Missouri voters. Participants were asked if they would support a ballot measure nearly identical to the one that Show Me Cannabis Regulation attempted to place on the ballot in 2012. 50% of respondents supported such a measure, 45% opposed it, and 5% were undecided. After the initial test, participants heard more details about the proposal and were presented with an equal number of statements of support and opposition. This process increased support for the proposal to 54%. Because it was designed to reflect the opinions of likely 2014 voters, this poll likely understates the support for legalization among Missouri voters. National Cannabis Coalition Director of Research and Show Me Cannabis Regulation Board member Abi Sivasalam said, quote, "What we are discovering from analysis of polling from around the country is that when voters are drawn from a broader group, such as likely 2016 voters, the level of popular support for legalizing and regulating cannabis jumps by between 5 to 10%. Presidential elections dramatically increase voter turnout, especially among younger voters who overwhelmingly support reform." End quote. The poll was conducted in September of 2012 and was commissioned by the National Cannabis Coalition. It has a margin of error of 4.4%. Damian Lagoy, a prominent Colorado medical marijuana advocate, has died. This from the Denver Post. A man whose fight with AIDS and hepatitis C withered his body and made him the public face of medical marijuana patients in Colorado has died. Damian Lagoy, age 53, passed away Saturday, advocates from the group Sensible Colorado announced this week. In 2007 and again in 2009, Lagoy won major court battles that secured medical marijuana patients a voice in the regulatory process, and that laid the foundation for the earliest medical marijuana dispensaries. Lagoy was diagnosed with HIV in 1986 and hepatitis C in 1998, according to Sensible Colorado. The medical treatments for both conditions left him with severe nausea, which he used marijuana to quell so that he could eat and keep the medicines down. A slight man, Lagoy's weight fell below 100 pounds at one point. With the help of marijuana, it rebounded to 110 pounds, he told the Denver Post last year. Last year, Sensible Colorado gave Lagoy its first ever Lifetime Achievement Award. Brian Vincente, executive director of Sensible Colorado, said in a statement, quote, "He was a friend, he was a freedom fighter, and he changed Colorado forever. He will be missed." End quote. University of Texas votes down marijuana arrest policy change from KVUE in Austin. Authors of a bill to change marijuana enforcement on University of Texas campus were hoping to pass legislation that would be the first of its kind. However, after a vote of 9 to 13 Tuesday night, the bill was shot down. The student government was proposing a bill that would ask University of Texas police to issue citations for all marijuana possessions under 4 ounces instead of making arrests. The business of pot emerges in Washington and Colorado from ABC News, featured on Good Morning America. The story tells of Robert Corey, the owner and general counsel of Denver's Club 64, a private marijuana membership club, and also mentions Frankie Schnarr, the owner of Frankie's Sports Bar and Grill in Olympia, Washington, where we had just visited last weekend. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, March 27th, 2013. I'm Russ Belville. When we come back, we go behind the headlines and take a look at The Atlantic magazine, its look at the legalization movement for 2016, and its knocks on Oregon for 2012. You're listening to 420radio.org. This is the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back after this.
420radio.org is listener-supported cannabis community radio, and while we value every $4.20 donation that comes in monthly from our members, we take this moment to offer an extra special thanks to our most generous donors who have provided over $1,000 worth of support to 420radio.org. For their privacy's sake, we'll identify these knights and dames of the smoky table as Sir Randy of the Lakes, Dame Kathleen the Beneficent, Dame Kaylee the Wise, Sir Travis of Stumptown, Sir Rolla J of Cush, and others who wish to remain anonymous. Thank you, lords and ladies, for your most generous patronage.
Legalize it. Don't criticize.
I'm just overjoyed. I've been cannabis activist for 40 years.
We're turning the corner on a failed policy that's been disastrous for our communities, and things are going to get better.
80 years ago, we repealed alcohol prohibition in this state. We did it prior to the federal government, and we're doing the same thing when it comes to marijuana. We are a step ahead, and we will continue to lead the way. It means I'm going to smoke a lot of weed tonight. Woo!
Some call it marijuana.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
Some of them call it ganja.
All right, welcome back. 12 and a half after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines. Speaking of legalize it, and the Atlantic magazine just took a look at marijuana legalization in a piece that was posted today. And I wanted to take a look at this for a couple of reasons, not the least of which are some of the pot shots, pardon the pun, that it took against the Oregon marijuana movement. And it talked about, of course, it talked in glowing terms about how Washington and Colorado passed marijuana legalization in 2012. And then they go on to, slam Oregon. This is one of their quotes. An Oregon effort would almost certainly have prevailed too if proponents there hadn't overreached with toxic legislative language that scared off donors and earned ridicule from local media. Further down the piece, meanwhile, activists expected to get referenda on full legalization with tax and regulate language on the ballot in 2016 in states like Oregon, Maine, Alaska, and California that already have medical programs in place. The failed Oregon campaign would have effectively recast the state liquor board as a massive pot retailer, and the ballot initiative's preamble might have been plucked right out of Richard Linklater's 1993 high school party flick Dazed and Confused, right down to its mention of George Washington growing hemp plants at Mount Vernon. That debacle reflects the enduring presence of more extreme voices within a constituency that has historically kept one foot outside the traditional political channels. The man behind it was Paul Stanford, a medical marijuana titan who normal executive director Alan St. Pierre describes as having a, quote, rap sheet longer than your arm, end quote. Stanford pleaded guilty to tax evasion in 2011, one of the several scrapes with the IRS. Reformers are worried he'll try again in 2014, rather than waiting for the higher turnout that comes with a presidential race. So, I wanted to take a moment and comment on this because I'm not going to dispute, anything about Measure 80 and how it was a hempster's wet dream kind of a bill. And I myself criticized a lot of the problems with it. But I don't understand why this piece has to go back and rehash what happened Oregon 2012 in the frame of what it was talking about for moving forward, other than this paragraph about reformers are worried he'll try again in 2014. And love him or hate him, good or bad, whatever you want to say, Paul Stanford is a true believer. He truly believes in what he's doing, and he does this for wanting to end this mad prohibition of hemp and cannabis. I absolutely know that down in my heart. Now, would he also make a buck in legalization? Sure, but so would a lot of people. But that's not the point that I want to make about this. The point I want to make about this is, why is anybody worried about Paul Stanford or anybody moving forward in 2014? I just don't understand why that's even a problem. Let's say he goes forward in 2014, gets on the ballot and wins. Great, then great. We got legalization 2 years early. But if he gets out there, gets on the ballot and loses, why does that make a move for 2016 any more devastating than the loss in 2012 already is? If Paul Stanford loses in 2012 with something silly, comes back in 2014 with something maybe better written and also loses, the effort that comes forth in 2016 can at least say, hey, look, we're not him. We're the other guys. Here's something different. And you can capitalize on that. And the activism and the energy that will be brought forth by people trying to get something on the ballot through 2014 can only further the conversation, can only get more people talking about legalization. It really seems to me the only danger here is that somebody trying for 2016 might pour their money into an educational campaign in 2013 that ends up passing someone else's legalization in 2014. And I would hate to have to think that that's the motivation behind trying to trash Paul Stanford or trying to dissuade anybody from moving forward in 2014. Why not both? Why not run a campaign of education aiming toward 2016 and let the, if you want to call it fringe, edge of the reform movement run something in 2014? If they win, great. If they don't, you can play against that. You can triangulate as being the sensible alternative. I see it as a win-win situation. I don't understand why we need to denigrate anybody's chances of trying to get on the ballot or make a change here. If they're competing against each other, if two groups are going for 2014, that's a different story. Now you're cannibalizing your own resources. Now you're making it a confusing educational effort. But if one group is dead set on 2014 and another one's dead set on 2016, both go for, with my blessing, go for it. Let's get legalization on the ballot as many times as we can. Now, some other things that are really good about this Atlantic piece, and we'll post the link to this in our chat room here, talks about how politicians now, some big name politicos like New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, California's Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, and Newark, New Jersey Mayor Cory Booker are starting to stake out some liberal stances on drug policy. My congressional representative, Earl Blumenauer, who, when he was in the state legislature, pushed through the first decrim in the nation, 1973. He talks about how there's been a sea change now. We're going to pass a point of no return. So it's become very, very good here. And they also mention Beto O'Rourke in El Paso winning a primary victory over an 8-term incumbent, Sylvester Reyes. And now he's in the House of Representatives. And he had a very pro-marijuana legalization stance. And it also talks about a lot of the demographic trends that I have been noting, how the GOP is becoming increasingly a white minority and aging population. They need minority voters. They need younger voters. They need women voters, and they can use this issue to their advantage. But they also point out in the Atlantic article how Democrats have a constituency now, in how some of the unions, the labor unions, are now starting to see the availability of unionized marijuana industry, and how NAACP and other minority rights groups are getting involved in the issue. So it's becoming a bipartisan on maybe both of the younger, more progressive sides of the aisle, of both the right and the left, that are starting to coalesce into a very pro-marijuana constituency. Now, there's still some work to do on this. It's going to take a while before we get to the point where everybody is going to be able to sing Kumbaya, hold hands, and get something passed at the federal level. But even in Florida, they're starting to look at this. Rand Paul is starting to stand out on the Republican side as having a powerful voice for ending the war on drugs. Mark Kleiman, who's now the pot czar in Washington state, warns there could be a backlash. He warns that If Colorado replaces Mexico as the source of American marijuana, that would be something that could cause the feds to really rethink how hard they go against these legalized marijuana states. But I like his quote at the end where he says, quote, "On the other hand, California is already a clusterfuck, and the voters don't care," end quote. I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm for a pot czar who's unafraid to say clusterfuck.
Man, we've been dropping F-bombs lately. I don't know. Residuals from F-bomb Friday.
I guess so.
Let's smoke a bowl.
Take some medicine for that.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Yeah, I watch MTV all the time. They have the Rock Against Drug commercials, that whole campaign. These guys have, like, slid into fucking school buses and killed 20 children. Rather than a facial license, they made a public service announcement. Yeah, no shit. Yeah. I love these guys that is like, "Hello, listen, don't get caught with drugs or you'll have to do a commercial just like this one." I think I found the message. The message is don't get caught. Rock Against Drugs. What a fucking name. Somebody was high when they came up with this title. Yeah. It's like Christians Against Christ. Rock created drugs. What are they talking about? They go together.
I am not a stoner. I am nothing you've heard. I'm you. We may not be happy with the world that we live in. Politicians who believe in criminalization, making deals with big pharma, and trading big money behind the scenes is not a way to stay in office. I will go to bat for you. I will go to Burning Man and smoke my brains out. I'm Terry Joyce, and I approve this message. I'm you, and also, I'm a witch.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Irie Wednesday, featuring reggae, ska, and other world music genres. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
Welcome back, everybody. Time to get Irie, and that means we turn things over to Brian the Red. But before we get Irie, we got to talk about pink leaf T-shirts.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've still got some pink leaf T-shirts, and I think the site is running out of time. I'm losing it because I don't have money. I'm a volunteer in all aspects of the word. But I've still got some T-shirts left that I paid for, and we're going to be auctioning some of those off to help me pay for some of the other stuff, expenses that I have. So, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be posting a couple of those up on the 420.org, 420radio.org website, and you guys can bid on some pink leaf T-shirts. And I hope to get these all sold and out to people by the time that the Global Cannabis March comes around. Show your knowledge, actually, say, hey, it cures cancer, screw all the ribbons, this is the cure, anyway.
There you go, Pink Leaf Project.
But anyway, it is Irie Wednesday, so today we've got group Black Uhuru, and one of the members of that group is Michael Rose, or was Michael Rose, and he's going to be here in town with Sister Carol, performing, I believe, this Friday night. So once again, if you have a chance to go see live music, go see live music. He was most famous for his song "Guess Who's Coming to Dinner," about the Natty Dreadlocks, and this is a great tune, keep us irie with Reggae With You. So check it out.
So smooth, we fought for our food. Tired of seeing brother die, tired of seeing brother try. Tired of seeing sister cry, tired of seeing sister die. I wanna reggae with you, I wanna reggae with you. To feel your good vibes too, I wanna live with you.
Called a peace revolution, and now let's take back America.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Like millions of freedom-loving Americans, I'm a marijuana smoker, and I don't think that should be any of the government's business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana. The next time you light up, take the time to let your elected officials know how you feel. It's time we legalize marijuana and stop treating marijuana smokers like criminals. For more information on how you can help legalize marijuana, please contact NORML at norml.org.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earleywine. Dr. Earleywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times Magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
All right, everybody, he's back and better than ever. It's Dr. Mitch Earleywine on the phone with us. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a great day.
Oh, me too. Looking forward to spring. We've got all sorts of celebration. I believe Passover's happening. We've got Easter coming up for, depending on which side of the New Testament, Old Testament you come down on. But all sorts of things happening. We're glad to have you back on the show. And as we always do here, it's live call-in at 971-533-7111. If you got questions for Dr. Mitch Earlywine, he's the author of the Ask Dr. Mitch column in High Times Magazine. You can just call in or get involved in our chat room. Send a chat question there via our Ustream, and we'll get those questions ready for him right away. But first, we always let the good doctor let us know what's happening in the world of science and statistics and polls. What's the latest in science, Dr. Mitch?
As it turns out, the New York State medical marijuana laws have finally been drafted, one version in the state Senate and one version in the state House equivalent, and that's totally encompassed me. I'm so preoccupied with that, I haven't actually seen any new data. But at this time of year, that's not a complete surprise, so that's really my only update, is that New York State is actually looking at a medical marijuana law.
All right. Well, that's good news. You're based out there in Albany, so that'd be good news out there for you and all the patients out there in New York State. We're looking forward to that. I wanted to ask you a question because I did some research recently, and I was taking a look at the DEA's drug scheduling and their categorization, and learned that there's a number. Every DEA scheduled drug has a number, and the marijuana number is 7360. And then from 7360 to 7379, they list various different types of cannabinoids. One thing, of course, we all know is that THC is Schedule 1 and marijuana itself is Schedule 1, which is kind of weird. The plant and what you get out of it are both Schedule 1. But here's something I didn't know, Dr. Mitch, and I wanted to get your comment on it. Dronabinol, the synthetic THC itself, is Schedule 1, but dronabinol in a sesame oil soft gelatin capsule is approved by the FDA is Schedule 3. So what the hell is it about sesame oil that makes cannabis safe?
I mean, this is just a beginning of the hypocrisy of the scheduling system. So in theory, because the essentially suspension in the sesame oil allows for a way to determine dosage better, that gives it an advantage, and so it can be administered essentially at the recommendation of a doctor at a fixed dose. So that's the rationale we're getting. Meanwhile, just to add insult to injury, cocaine, which we all know is about as dangerous as drugs can get, Schedule 2. Yeah. Because it has medical uses in intraocular surgery, so it closes down capillaries and creates local anesthesia on certain eye doctor operations. So yeah, this is completely insane, and I'm not about to defend it.
Well, we went through the list yesterday and even noted Desoxin, which is the trade name for methamphetamine, that's Schedule 2. So it's amazing. Another thing I learned in here, Nabilone, which is the trade name is Sesamet, is Schedule 2. So is it what is it because it's not again no sesame oil with Nabilone? Is that the deal?
Well, and the thing is that actually does have some established neurotoxicity, so it's markedly more dangerous than good old sesame oil and THC, and ends up in Schedule 2.
Wow.
I mean, it's complete madness.
And the only other one here, I found one I'd never heard of before, Parahexyl or Synhexyl. Does that ring any bells, and what the hell is that?
It was proposed as an antidepressant at one time, but I honestly don't feel like it's got any modern uses that folks are still going with, but I haven't been on top of that literature in over a year.
Yeah, all of these things, and they go on in the list to talk about how just because something's not in this controlled substances list doesn't mean they can't bust you for it. Anything that has the same pharmacological properties or is purported to have the same pharmacological properties can get you busted. Is the urban myth true about people getting busted for, trying to sell a bag of oregano and saying it's pot?
In fact, that is true. As it turns out, this developed because the designer drugs were moving so fast. So they made MDA illegal, and then folks quickly developed MDMA, and they wanted to kind of be ahead of these folks who could, just basically add an oxygen molecule and suddenly have a legal drug again. But this essentially conspiracy to sell cannabis, even if it is a bag of oregano, does seem to be at least a legal possibility. and not just an urban legend.
All right, we got some questions coming from our chat room. One here from Herb Staley, and recently, as of course Washington's had its famous or infamous 5 nanogram per se limit, and people have been paying attention to the issue of marijuana in driving. One kind of rule of thumb people have thrown out, some people have said, wait 4 hours. After you smoked, wait 4 hours, you should be fine. Herb is asking here, do I need to wait longer than 4 hours to drive after eating an edible or taking some tincture? And I guess we could just generally address the whole how long should you wait before you drive?
In truth, I'm not a fan of these heuristics and rules of thumb, simply because everybody's different, your dosage is different, and all of those things. Edibles tend to metabolize more slowly and stay in your system longer, so any rule of thumb like that could be problematic. When you think about some of the behavioral correlates, though, of intoxication that are like the roadside sobriety test, that's what I would recommend. If you can stand on one foot with the other foot extended 18 inches and hold your arms out and do that for 30 seconds, a count to 30 aloud, and you don't mess up any of the numbers, and you don't touch your foot down, and you don't sway like a maniac, I'd say odds are high you probably could drive. If you can't do that, it's probably time to spend the night at somebody else's house.
All right. I agree personally. I always thought trying to wait how much time is problematic. And I'm wondering, with the respect to the tinctures and the edibles, those are things I tend to stay away from. I like to call those horizontals. I need to have some place to lay down if I'm going to have those.
They're great if you're at home and your bed is handy.
Exactly. So is that, something that people need to take into account, is maybe a longer onset time where, if they just had a brownie and then say, well, I feel fine, I'm going to go drive, and then, 30 minutes later.
In fact, and that's very important when you're considering subsequent doses. So sad but true, a lot of folks eat a brownie, think I'm not feeling anything after 45 minutes, I should eat another one. Trust me, no, you shouldn't. And the sad fact, too, is people go an hour and a half, get the munchies, and what's available, more brownies. That's always a bad idea.
Okay. I've got a question. I'm just kind of pulling this from our chat room. They're having some discussion, and two of our longtime listeners are educators. One, a teacher in public schools here in America, another one working university work in a foreign land. Both of them had a situation where they were forced out of their teaching positions because it was known that they were advocates for cannabis. Has this ever been a pressure in your academic career, and have you heard of other colleagues where this has been a problem?
I'm afraid so, both for me and someone who just received a very prestigious award from Americans for Safe Access. So the problem is people just don't understand. So I was up for an award at USC and didn't get it, and I was rather disappointed, and found out later that someone had written to the president essentially saying my work was too controversial for the award, which certainly hurt my feelings. Here at SUNY Albany, folks have been incredibly supportive. Somebody wrote the provost an extremely outrageous letter about how I should not be molding young minds of the future, and she was quick to rise to my offense and argued academic freedom, and I felt very relieved. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case, but this is the risk we all have to take, and I feel like if I don't stand up, who's gonna? I get emails from folks who are still in the alcohol world doing the kind of research I used to do before tenure, when I was basically too afraid to do this. I know they're heavy cannabis users, but they're not about to do what I'm doing, and they think my opportunities for grant funding have been essentially restricted. I feel like the United States is bound to come around, and if I stand idly by, I'm just going to feel so guilty that it'll blow my buzz.
Well, we wouldn't want to have that, no. And you mentioned tenure. How much does that affect your ability to be, as you're here every week talking about marijuana with us? I mean, it must have a lot of effect.
Well, it's interesting because pre-tenure I was very frightened and did not have any marijuana publications directly, and one that was just kind of marijuana stuff offhand. I got to commend my grad student Mallory Laughlin, who presented down in Philly at Normal's recent Mid-Atlantic conference, and she's in the thick of the second year of graduate school and is very much an advocate and very out there, and I really got to hand it to her. But I think when we go to the job market, I'm really going to have to write a letter that explains that she's an outstanding scholar, and that work is completely independent of of any of this kind of activism, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that at least in Washington and Colorado, there will be jobs for her.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have a question on, the latest phenomenon. Everybody's talking about dabs, and one of the stories that was just on Good Morning America featured Club 64 in Colorado, Frankie's in Olympia, Washington, where they're having these private clubs open up where people are using marijuana. And one of the ways that a few of these clubs are skirting the anti-smoking laws is by only allowing vaporization. And in one of I think it was the AP photo that I saw, it showed a woman administering, a BHO dab, the guy taking on, and the caption said, taking on vapor. And I just wanted to confirm that when people are using these oils on these hot nails, that's vapor and not smoke.
As it turns out, we're getting into some strange hair splitting, but in fact, because it is the oil and it's burning at such a high temperature, we really don't have the normal sort of pyrotechnics, if you will, that are associated with burning plants. So it's unclear if we have some of the same potential pulmonary irritants, some of the things that could bother your lungs, but it seems pharmacologically rather unlikely. Now, I do want to emphasize we do have some reports and some data we're gathering of folks who, get burned on the nail and folks who, mishandle a blowtorch, and obviously these are serious safety issues. But we're finding, at least among medical users, that the folks who use the dabs really aren't reporting any more negative consequences than your standard medical user. And I have cautious optimism about this practice. My concern, though, is that the dosage is just outrageous sometimes. And I would like to encourage folks to adapt the theme that a little dab will do you.
Yeah, I actually had what was called a glob, and it was it led me into a hyperemetic episode. Let's just put it that way. And this has convinced me that you're absolutely right. We need to start thinking this as sipping whiskey, if you will, and take it easy with the dabs.
I like that metaphor.
All right. Well, that's about all the time we got here for our Cannabis Science segment with Dr. Mitch. And folks, if you didn't get your question in or you're shy, you can always send it by email at 420research@gmail.com or visit our contact form at 420 Radio. There's a pull-down menu. You can select Ask Dr. Mitch from there. We also have an Ask Dr. Mitch forum where we're collecting questions as well. Dr. Mitch, thanks for joining us, and happy holidays to you, sir.
Same to you.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisements because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Cast your eyes up to the skies. What is it to live and die?
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Yarr! Thar be pirates here. Har, 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 har.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant.
I want to tell you about a conversation that takes place in most medical marijuana states all the time. Now, not California, and probably not in Colorado or Washington that much, but I can tell you secondhand that they take place a lot in Oregon. It boils down to something like this. I've been using marijuana for my chronic pain, and I came to get my medical marijuana card. How long have you had this chronic pain? Since the accident, about 12 years ago. Okay, all we need now is a copy of your medical records from your last 3 visits to your doctor that document your chronic pain. Doctor, are you listening to me? I grow marijuana for my chronic pain. I can't afford a doctor. I'm sorry. But if you can't prove your chronic pain with a diagnosis from 3 different doctor visits within the last 3 years, we can't give you a recommendation to use marijuana legally to treat the chronic pain that you can't prove. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people in Oregon alone who could benefit from using cannabis medically. However, the expense and the inconvenience presented by all the hoops they have to jump through makes getting a medical marijuana card more difficult than titling an out-of-state car in this state. Just trust me on that one. It's not easy. First, you got to have one of this narrow list of qualifying conditions. And then you have to see your doctor at least 3 times in 3 years where he or she verifies that your qualifying condition is in the chart notes, right? They got to write it down. Yes, he has chronic pain in his shoulder, whatever it might be. Then, even if you're an AIDS patient in a hospice waiting to die, you can't get your card without those records. Now, let's say that somehow you do have the ability to afford 3 or more doctor's visits to get your proof of pain, nausea, seizures, spasticity, glaucoma, cancer, AIDS, cachexia, or Alzheimer's agitation. So next, you have to go to a different, shall we say, more herbal-friendly clinic where staff will collect and review those records from your doctor visits, then have you evaluated by their doctor. And that doctor, if your records line up, will then write you a recommendation for medical marijuana. Now, why not just talk to your original 3 doctor visit for the recommendation? Well, that would be logical, wouldn't it? Your regular primary care doctor who's documenting your chronic pain, would be nice if he would write the recommendation. Unfortunately, most doctors who would recommend medical marijuana for their patients cannot. They're restricted by their insurance, by their clinic, by their hospital, by their federal contract, even from just the general medical culture against being pot docs. And then others, they're just uneducated on the subject. They still believe marijuana couldn't possibly be medicine. So you end up with a handful of clinic doctors making the most of the recommendations that their colleagues can't or won't, and then they get excoriated in the media for being pot docs. So, after the expense of your 3 doctor visits and your 1 clinic visit, you then get to go to the state medical marijuana program office to turn in your recommendation and your $200 fee. You could easily be in for about $1,000 by this point. Oh yeah, and an extra $50 if you want to designate someone else to grow your marijuana. Now pick carefully, because if you want to change that grower later on, that's going to cost you $100. These fees in Oregon were raised recently because the medical marijuana program was running a surplus, and lawmakers appropriated that to balance other budgets like clean drinking water. Isn't it nice to know that the clean water in those famous downtown Portland Benson bubblers is funded by gouging sick people with cancer who choose cannabis over chemo? Now, in actuality, and no joke, people, in Oregon the fees were raised specifically to reduce participation in the medical marijuana program. As State Representative Peter Buckley noted, quote, "There was an argument made that if the fees were a little higher, that would perhaps dissuade people who didn't need the cards from going down that road." End quote. Which has got to be the dumbest public policy thinking in years. If your program has both needy, deserving patients and greedy weed dealers, guess who drops off the rolls, and guess who chalks $200 up as the cost of doing business? If you've got both legitimate pain patients whose disability prevents employment, and you've got illegitimate pain fakers with jobs getting a card just to avoid arrest, guess who drops off the rolls, and guess who comes up with an extra $100 to stay out of jail and keep his job? All of this leads me to today's news out of Illinois from Illinois Representative Lou Lang, who says he's 1 or 2 votes shy of passing medical marijuana in his state. And this quote that was found at the end of a very lengthy write-up on the Illinois medical marijuana, this was his quote. "In the California experience, virtually anyone can go to any doctor and within 5 minutes get a prescription for medical marijuana. In Illinois, if you don't have a bona fide relationship with that doctor that can be proven, you aren't getting the product. We drafted this bill this way to address issues in California, end quote. 1 or 2 votes shy. When I worked for Normal, I delivered a presentation that was called The Box Canyon, and it's up in our 420 Radio Silver forums. If you're a Silver VIP, you can actually download and watch the thing. In it, I tracked how medical marijuana that began in California with the incredibly inclusive any other illness for which marijuana provides relief, and this West Coast medical marijuana that evolved in Oregon and Washington to large home gardens and 1.5 pounds of weed, has now withered down to just 3 strains of less than 10% THC, no home grow, medicine of last resort, and doctor registration in New Jersey. As I wrote last year, that's the theory of medical marijuana's Box Canyon. It's the idea that if you fight only for medical marijuana, marijuana has to become increasingly medical. And medical marijuana laws have to become increasingly restrictive in order to keep the potheads out. So, what are they doing in Illinois to keep the potheads out? A 2.5 ounce limit every 14 days, purchased at dispensaries only, no home grow allowed. You may qualify only with cancer, glaucoma, HIV/AIDS, Hep C, Lou Gehrig's disease, Crohn's disease, Alzheimer's agitation, cachexia, wasting syndrome, muscular dystrophy, severe fibromyalgia, spinal cord disease, Tarlov cysts, arachnoiditis, hydromyelia, syringomyelia, rheumatoid arthritis, fibrous dysplasia, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, post-concussion syndrome, multiple sclerosis, Arnold-Chiari malformation, and syringomyelia, spinocerebellar ataxia, Parkinson's, Tourette's, myoclonus, dystonia, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, complex regional pain syndromes type 1, causalgia, complex regional pain syndromes type 2, neurofibromatosis, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, Sjögren's syndrome, lupus, interstitial cystitis, myasthenia gravis, hydrocephalus, nail patella syndrome, or residual limb pain. But only if your doctor and the Department of Health approve you. And this is only a 4-year pilot program that expires if the legislature doesn't reapprove it. So enjoy your legal medicine while you can. We might just take it away in 4 years. The problem with this keep the potheads out mentality is that it never hurts the potheads and always hurts the patients. Taking away home grow from patients doesn't stop illegal growers. It just gives them the patient's business. Restricting limits to the amount that can be possessed just keeps prices artificially high, as patients who could buy in bulk for the year have to buy small amounts every couple of weeks instead. The more restrictions you put on conditions and doctors just mean patients who can't afford doctors or have a less than acceptable condition become criminals or go without an effective medicine. I mean, you don't see anxiety, irritable bowel syndrome, or post-traumatic stress disorder in that Illinois list, do you? Meanwhile, if you're a patient in Colorado or Washington, for anything as severe as terminal cancer to as trivial as a hangnail, you cannot be arrested or punished for your possession of 1 ounce of marijuana. You don't have to see any doctors, get any card, nor pay any fee. In Colorado, you can even grow 3 of your own plants without registries, zip ties, or grower fees. And if you like, you can still become a medical marijuana patient in those states and even have even more liberty to grow and use marijuana. It's always been an untenable position to take that some people are healthy enough to put in a cage over marijuana use. As we first began the fight for marijuana rights, it was necessary to champion just one reason for using marijuana and protect just one class of marijuana users. The prohibition wall of ignorance erected in the 80s needed that crack of Prop 215 to begin to crumble. And medical marijuana has done, as many of us predicted, it opened people's minds up to the plant itself and all its uses. Once pot became a safe, effective nausea medicine for Granny, how could it be a demon weed for a college kid? But now, continuing to fight a medical-only fight for marijuana is only going to produce more restrictive, less effective medical marijuana laws. At every successive state, there will be some group of patients who will be left behind to secure marijuana rights for a dwindling group of the most severely ill and disabled. Now, to be fair, that dwindling group does seem to be gaining some new rights, such as non-discrimination in health care, child custody, and employment, but at the cost of home grow and limited possession. These next 4 years are pivotal. Colorado and Washington must provide good examples of legalization in marijuana markets. California, Oregon, Alaska, and Maine need to make the ballot for legalization in 2016. And during this time, we must point out that only legalization can benefit most patients, and anything less is second-class citizenship. Because I believe, and the feds have confirmed, that keeping our movement in a holding pattern with medical marijuana allows them to develop cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. Sativex is already in phase 3 clinical trials right now. Then, those medicines will be given to the medical marijuana patients. You said you wanted medical marijuana. Here it is. And the rest of us will be back to just being potheads. Woo. Have to excuse me for rolling the closer early, but I'm losing my voice. So, we'll take it into hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, and maybe we'll play some videos too. I give and I give and I give. Thanks for joining us here. Appreciate it very much. In hour 2, we're going to talk a little bit about the 420 tour that I'm going to go on. And I've got a new Indiegogo campaign up, trying to raise $25,000 for the campaign. I know it's a lot of money, but if you can help donate, please do. That's going to get us our mobile touring studio. Hey, for Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Selassie, I hear I cry.
Oh, what's going on? There's only one chief, see my father. What state of emergency?
Oh, baby.
Well, I know. Well, just say,
oh, baby.
I do the most.
Sometimes it seems